What's up, everybody? Welcome to the 4040 Vision podcast. I am your host, Khaled Abdallah, and I'm joined today by two of my fellow co-hosts, Osama Dahud. How you doing, man?
Hey, how's it going?
Good, good, good. And Sulman Haque. What's up, man? How are you?
Yo, what's going on, man?
So on today's episode, we will be doing a redraft of the 2005 NBA draft. So you've heard a couple of these in the past, probably with me and Salman or me and Osama, and we've kind of taken turns making picks for each of the teams. But today we're going to be doing a little bit of a different format. So Osama and Salman will take turns making selections for the teams, explaining, maybe they stick with the pick that was already made or switch it up a little bit. And what I will do is I will be choosing which pick I prefer of the two. And in case they align, then of course each one gets a point, and then we'll see who is the winner at the end. We'll also be doing a quick segment on honorable mentions at the end and talk about guys that perhaps did not survive the redraft and why that might have been the case. So we will start off with the number one pick in the draft, and that is Andrew Bogut. So the Milwaukee Bucks, with the first overall pick, selected center Andrew Bogut out of Utah. Solman, who did you have the Bucks picking here?
I went with Chris Paul. He's going to be a future Hall of Famer. Guy's a 12-time All-Star, 11-time All-NBA team, 7-time All-NBA defensive team. I mean, he's just he's just like a true point guard. He's a face of the franchise type of guy. I know he's jumped around a bit, but he's just one of the best pure point guards out there. And who knows? Maybe he gets a ring here with Giannis later on in his career, things like that. But he definitely changes the franchise for Milwaukee. Andrew Bogut didn't do that. Good player, but Chris Paul is just a no-brainer here in my mind.
Okay, and Osama, who did you have going first overall?
Yeah, I kept it simple and went with Andrew, but I'm just kidding. Yeah, I picked Chris Paul as well. What's interesting? This Milwaukee Bucks team that would have drafted him was starting TJ Ford at point guard, and he was averaging 12 points a game, 6 assists, and they were playing Michael Redd 39 minutes per game. So you can argue that Terry Stotts was trying to kill Michael Redd. So CP3 would have been a huge upgrade to the backcourt, with Michael Redd, fireworks every night. And I think that for any franchise Chris Paul is in, it would have definitely changed their trajectory, right? Who knows what ends up happening with Milwaukee long term, because he's so impactful. He elevates the play of everyone around him. Take a team like Oklahoma City. We thought he was going there to be left for dead, and he took them to the play-in through the bubble, right? And they made it to the playoffs. So, what else can you say about Chris Paul? He has had some recent, career redemption, performing well for Phoenix in the postseason. As much as he's been made a bit of a meme online, he's one of the best point guards to ever do it.
There's actually a lot you can say about Chris Paul. So both
I know you don't like him, yeah.
positive and negative. We are a kind of an anti-Chris Paul podcast. I guess it's fair to say. All three of us are Warriors fans, so we have plenty of feelings and thoughts on Chris Paul.
Real quick, are we anti-Chris Paul, or have we just delighted in defeating him for the last decade?
The thing is,
I think we're anti-Clippers more than Chris Paul. I love Chris Paul coming in. I love Chris. Then he became a Clipper, and I hated him.
I mean, I remember watching him in that tournament, in the '05 March Madness. I thought he was great. I loved watching him. He's fun guy to root for at the time. But maybe it is partially the Clippers thing. But even before he was like a Warriors villain, I don't remember really appreciating him and really wanting to root for him. I didn't like the shenanigans. But maybe he turned up the shenanigans when he was with the Clippers, and that team in general was just really unlikable. Him, Blake Griffin is not the most popular guy in the league. So, and then Doc Rivers, all that on top of each other. So
he was also supposed to be a Laker, so that might have dragged down his morale a little bit for the first few years.
Yeah, and that's probably the biggest what if of his career is, what if the Hornets at the time actually had a real owner instead of being owned by the league, and then he ends up with Kobe and whoever else was on the Lakers, and I mean, it doesn't change the fact that he's the best player in this draft, but it probably helps him shed that loser label that he's kind of been hitched with his whole career. So, well, I mean, he was the number one pick in this draft pretty clearly. So both you guys get a point here. So the next overall pick, or the next, not overall pick, just next pick. So the second overall pick, the Atlanta Hawks selected forward Marvin Williams out of the University of North Carolina. Osama, who did you have the Hawks picking here?
I took Williams, but I took Darren Williams here. It was a no-brainer. Darren Williams at his peak was one of the best point guards in the league. I remember in high school just watching the Jazz dismantle the Warriors, and I just really appreciated how dominant they were at the time. I loved his beard too. He had a sharp razor line beard, and I really wanted that, but at the time couldn't really grow one. But no, so I mean, this is a no-brainer. I think the better player to draft overall, and the Atlanta Hawks at the time only had 2 point guards on the whole roster: Ty Lue and Royal Ivy. I'm sure you guys remember the great Royal Ivy. So this is a roster with Joe Johnson, Josh Smith, Al Harrington, Josh Childress, and Zaza Pachulia. And the Hawks said, you know what? We need another forward. Let's draft Marvin Williams. So yeah, they should have taken Darren Williams. He only went a pick later. His prime was, I mean, he was really good. A smooth facilitator. He was a good finisher at the rim. He adjusted his game later in his career and started to shoot from beyond the perimeter a little bit more. Yeah, Darren Williams, no brainer.
That's another no-brainer pick. Salman, who did you have here? I'm assuming it's the same guy.
Yeah, it's Darren Williams. Yes, exactly. I mean, to all the things Osama said, he, in his prime, he was averaging like 20 and 10 a game. So just second best point guard behind CP3. And I know a lot of people coming into this draft debated CP3 versus Daron, but now it's CP3's won that argument. But Daron was definitely in that conversation for a few years. So yeah, no brainer pick here, number 2.
I think it was a legitimate conversation for a while, right? It was
for a while, yeah, absolutely. And then Daron fell off with the Nets, and then it didn't turn. Then it was like, okay, well, now it's CP3 just because he's still playing and he's still putting up numbers.
Yeah, and it was almost like a battle of styles. Who did you prefer? Did you prefer the distributor and Chris Paul? You're like, okay, Darren Williams, he's a bigger guard. I think he's 6'4". Chris Paul measures in at 6 foot, but he's probably up less than that. So it became like a preference in terms of size and style and things like that. But it's pretty clear that Chris Paul has had the better career. He's a better player overall. But again, Darren Williams makes great sense here. He helped revitalize that Utah franchise. They went pretty deep in the playoffs with him. Things took a left turn in his career with the Nets. I don't know if that's so much on him or management going all in with these older players, bringing in Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. And then, of course, he completely falls off a cliff when he gets to Cleveland, and he's supposed to be this, I don't know what he was supposed to be on that Cavs team, but he didn't do much of anything. And now his career's over, and I think he's boxing. I think his last professional moment was boxing Frank Gore. Is that right?
Was it? Did he narrowly beat Frank Gore? Is that what happened to him? Did he fight Le'Veon Bell?
Yeah.
Is he okay?
No, Le'Veon Bell knocked out Adrian Peterson, but yeah, still celebrity boxing. But yeah, at his peak, he was incredible. He's another guy I really loved watching in college on that Illinois team with D. Brown. That was a special team. I think they went to the national championship that year, but yeah, it was surprising that he was not. Yeah, it was surprising that he wasn't the second overall pick, but he was third, so not like he came out of nowhere. So we'll move on to the third overall pick. And speaking of Darren Williams, the Utah Jazz selected Darren Williams out of the University of Illinois, and he is off both of your boards. So, Salman, who did you have the Jazz picking here instead?
I went Danny Granger here. I did debate David Lee, but the Jazz had Carlos Boozer on the roster, and so I went Danny Granger, who could probably slide in here at shooting guard for the Jazz and play alongside AK-47. Granger just in his prime was a guy who could score. He was averaging like 22 points per game and 5 rebounds a game and shooting like 40% from 3-point line in his prime years. And so he's a bucket getter. He's a guy who brings a scoring punch here to this Jazz team that has Boozer and AK-47. And he's just, I think if he stayed healthier longer, he was probably easily maybe top 2 here, maybe ahead of Daron Williams. But I think he's a solid number 3-4 guy in this draft, and so I went Danny Granger here.
Okay. And Osama, who did you have? The
Yeah,
Jazz
this is
pick.
where our lists will probably differ quite a bit from here on out. So I took the player drafted 40th overall, and that was Monte Ellis. So he was drafted by the Warriors much later in this draft. But the Jazz get a point guard that they still very much needed. There's a reason why they took Darren Williams. They already had Carlos Boozer and Mehmet Okur, and then they had Andre Kirilenko. They actually did go pretty guard heavy in this draft because they needed one. They took Darren Williams, CJ Miles, and Andre Owen. So they were totally screwed. The only active point guards on the roster were Keith McLeod and the great Milt Palacio. So I know Monte Ellis had his better years after the Warriors. He also fell off a scooter at one point and missed a little bit of time. But he couldn't play with Steph Curry because he needed the ball in his hands. I know he was an inefficient scorer, but he also played with the Warriors during a really terrible time where they couldn't really develop him. So he did need to get away from there. And if he was drafted by a franchise like Utah that needed a guard, I think they could have developed that shooting efficiency of his, and he would have had a much different start to his career.
Okay. I love that we're starting to differ here. So I think Granger, perhaps at his peak, was a better player. But Monte Ellis has a little bit of the durability edge to him, despite the fact that he did have that scooter injury. But I think in general, he was pretty healthy. And aside from the trade to Milwaukee, I think he probably would have had a longer career in Golden State, and that I wouldn't say derailed his career, but it really changed the trajectory of his career. He joins the Warriors at an interesting time during the We Believe era. He becomes kind of a cult figure in the Bay Area, and I don't remember too many folks. I don't remember how I felt at the time, but I know a lot of folks would have preferred that they trade away Steph Curry over Monte Ellis. We talked about this on the Warriors What If, I think, believe it was episode 2 of the 4040 Vision podcast. But I think in terms of career longevity, in terms of production, I'm going to go with Monte Ellis. He's actually the third leading scorer in this draft class. Granger's eighth, and he's got about 5,000 points less than Monte. So I'm going to give the edge to Osama for this pick. Any objections?
I can see that. My only gripe with Monte is he ends up on the Jazz here. He's probably I don't know how much Jerry Sloan's playing him, high school guy, coming out of he's straight out of high school. So I don't know how much play Monte gets here with Jerry Sloan, but that's fair. I can live with it.
No, that's a good point. And he probably doesn't play right away, but he didn't play too much right away with the Warriors. He started, I think, 40 games his rookie year. Or sorry, only 3 games his rookie year. So he got brought along slowly. And again, if he's playing maybe in a more disciplined offense, in a more disciplined situation versus playing with Don Nelson, maybe his career turns out a little bit differently. And like Sema said, he works on that efficiency and becoming a better player in that regard. So, all right. We're moving on to the 4th overall pick. So the then New Orleans Hornets selected point guard Chris Paul out of Wake Forest. So Chris Paul is not on the board for either of you guys. So Osama, who did you have the Hornets picking instead?
Yeah, this one is a bit of a curveball. I went with Andrew Bogut. I believe that at the time, the Hornets were starting 36-year-old, 12-year veteran PJ Brown at center. He was only averaging 7 rebounds a game, just 2 more than little Chris Paul and David West. So Bogut at his peak was, as a defensive anchor, elite at his peak. He was a elite rim protector. He could screen. He could pass the ball in the post. Durability was an issue, but he was an all-team defensive level player when healthy. And it might feel like because some of the early years he wasn't around that he rarely played. But during those playoff runs before the Kevin Durant year, he was available, especially in the postseason. He played I remember that Denver series and San Antonio. He was instrumental in getting past Memphis in their first championship run against a very difficult Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph led Grizzlies team. the Hornets as a defense would have been so much stronger. They ranked 19th in defensive rating, and they could have used Bogut. It's hard to come across. So far, we haven't had much defense in this draft. If you're looking for that, at one point in his peak, Bogut was an excellent defender, and this would be, if you're looking for defense, a solid pick.
Okay, and Sulman, who did you have the Hornets picking?
I went in an opposite direction. I went for more offense here for the Hornets. I took Lou Williams. Lou Williams is a guy who can just come in and score. And I think the Hornets really didn't have anyone that could score outside of David West. And, CP3 obviously was drafted by them for that reason as well. But, Lou Williams is a guy who's been, sixth man of the year 3 times. He's in his best seasons. He's averaged like 19 points per game and 5 assists off the bench. And he played 16 years here in the NBA. And so I thought, guy that can come in and score for the Hornets. They obviously had some needs both on offense and defense, and Lou Williams made more sense to me here over maybe Monte, just because he played 16 years, so a little bit longer than what Monte did. But to me, both very similar type guys, so I went Lou Williams.
Okay, I can see that. I think my issue with Lou Williams is I think he was another straight out of high school kid, another second round pick. So I think if you are picking at the top of the draft, I think you want to go with somebody that's a little bit more pro ready. And I think that's why I would lean towards Andrew Bogut. He was able to come in and contribute right away. He was never much of an offensive force. But at his best year with Milwaukee, he was averaging, I believe, 15 and 10. Or 16 and 10, I'm sorry. So he didn't have much, post moves or anything like that, much creativity in the post, and he wasn't the most skilled player. But I think he was a more immediate contributor than Lou Williams. I think we've seen Lou Williams in a starting role, and when he's asked to carry a team, I think that's where he struggles. He's perfect in his role. He's like the ultimate sixth man. I think when you're picking at this point in the draft, I think you want somebody that's going to be able to contribute and kind of lead your team. So for the second pick in a row, I'm going to go with Osama picking Andrew Bogut over.
I'm sensing a Warriors bias here, Khaled. You're just going with the guy who picked the ex-Warriors. That's what I'm sensing here.
I mean, the thing is, Bogut has become kind of a punchline, but there's a reason that basically in the 2016 finals, once he was out, they basically the Cavs basically had a free run at the basket, right? There's a reason
I think he revived himself with the Warriors a bit. Like he kind of changed himself, and like with the Warriors, he just. Like people were like, oh man, he's like you really saw how good of a defensive player he was with the Warriors. Maybe you didn't get that sense of him in Milwaukee, but definitely on the Warriors, you're like, damn, this guy is a defensive stopper.
Yeah, I mean, he was all defense team in 14-15, so it's not like he wasn't recognized for what he was doing. But he's probably not really a bust, but definitely fell short of expectations as the number 1 overall pick. I think he was expected to transform that Milwaukee franchise, but ultimately he had a good career. He was, productive for the Warriors, and of course a big part of that title team. So, all right. So, okay, so we'll move on to the 5th overall pick, and with the 5th overall pick, the Charlotte Bobcats, so not the Charlotte Hornets, selected point guard Raymond Felton out of UNC. Osama, who did you have the Bobcats picking here?
Yeah, I went for longevity here. I went with Lou Williams. He's still playing 1,100 games, over 1,100 games. Arguably, they should, when he's all done, they should call the Sixth Man of the Year award after him because he was the ultimate spark plug off the bench, elite at getting to the line. If you're not, if it doesn't play for your team, maybe to a frustrating degree, but a great finisher at the rim. His floater has such a beautiful touch. He was drafted by a Philly team that was already starting Allen Iverson. So the Bobcats drafted Raymond Felton. So taking Lou Williams instead gives him more opportunity in his career than he started with. He started off the bench. He didn't have many opportunities in his career to start because of where he was drafted. I know he was drafted really young. Bobcats needed a guard. Sweet Lou would have been, I think, more impactful than Raymond Felton in his inevitable short time because Lou Will was a bit of a journeyman, but he was a great talent everywhere he went. This would have been a great pick for the Bobcats, and again, one of the best 6 men of all time.
Okay, so Mon, who did you have the Bobcats picking?
I went with David Lee. The Bobcats badly needed a power forward, and later in this draft they took Sean May, but they were starting like Melvin Eli and Lonnie Baxter, and so they needed a power forward badly. And David Lee is probably one of the best here in the draft. He's a three-time All-Star, one-time All-NBA third team, and in some of his prime years, he was averaging 20 points per game, 11 rebounds, and he played a solid 12 years in the league. And so, out of which 5 or 6 were really good years for him. And so definitely a big upgrade here for the Bobcats. They don't draft Sean May, who was a big bust. And, he's a guy who comes in and contributes for the Bobcats.
So for some of the same reasons that I thought that Andrew Bogut made more sense with the 4th overall pick to the Hornets, I'm going to go again with David Lee. You can accuse me, Salman, once again, of anti-Warrior.
No, this time I'm not accusing. I'm not accusing you of anything.
Yeah, but it's pro.
You're voting in my
Warriors
favor. I'm
bias.
not accusing you of it.
Pro Warriors bias. Again, I love Lou Williams. I love what he brings to the table. He's one of the most skilled offensive guards we've had in this era. His longevity is incredible. Maybe some of that longevity has to do with the fact that he's not usually starting games, so he's able to kind of conserve his energy and all that. David Lee, he's an interesting player because I think he's most known in his career for being benched in favor of Draymond, and that's kind of what he's most known for. But for a long time, he was a really good player. I mean, this guy was the 30th overall pick. He was an all-star with the Knicks. Maybe you can accuse him kind of being an empty calories guy. But at his peak, he's another guy that was, 20 and 10. He was 20 and 11 for a few years with the Knicks. He was part of the revitalization of the Warriors, the rebirth, so to speak, of the Warriors with Steph Curry in this era. So I think he deserves a little more credit for that. So for those reasons, I'm going to go with Salman and David Lee. So any objections to that pick? Or that?
I think we should just
award?
keep picking players that played for the Warriors, and we'll get the point. I think that's what. Is there anyone else that played for the Warriors?
We're running out of ex-Warriors here now.
There's more than you think. I'm looking down the list. There's quite a few guys. So just wait.
That's true.
All right. So we'll do a quick check at this. So at the 5th overall pick, it's 4-3 in favor of Osama. So we'll move on to the 6th overall pick, and that is Martell Webster. So the Portland Trailblazers selected Martell Webster, 6th overall. So Salman, who did you have them picking here?
Yeah, here I went Monte Ellis, and obviously Monte is definitely a top 10 guy here in this draft. He's a guy who can score 20 plus a game any given night. And the Trailblazers here were starting guys like Juan Dixon, Steve Blake. So Monte would have definitely came in here. He would have complemented Zach Randolph here, and they were I think at this time they were trying to go away from being the Jailblazers and really becoming a much better franchise. And maybe he becomes a face of this like Trailblazers franchise as he did for the Warriors for a few years, and he becomes a beloved figure down there in Portland with his scoring abilities.
Okay, and Osama, who did you have him going with?
I'm going for the win. I picked Jarrett Jack. No, I'm just kidding. Another Warrior. Danny Granger, a.k.a. Batman, a.k.a. The Gift. Excellent nicknames. He only played 586 games. It's probably ranked near the bottom half of this list, especially in the lottery side. But at his peak, one of the top small forwards in the league. He was talented scorer, quick release. He could light up the scoreboard. I know injuries kind of hindered his career in the second half. He did get an all-star appearance because he was so solid in his early days in Indiana. And he actually had a nice swan song in Miami. He played a ton of games at the end of his career before he retired for the Miami Heat. I know the Blazers had several forwards on the team at the time, but none that would have stood out with the production of Batman.
He was, I don't want to say he was an instrumental part of those Indiana teams that went against Miami, because I don't think he was playing all that much, but he was a pretty big part of those teams, and that's, I think, the memory I most associate with him. But I do think that for this team, for this Portland team, because you said they had all those forwards, Zach Randolph, Theo Ratliff, Travis Outlaw, like they had some decent guys, especially Zach Randolph, probably the best of the bunch. So for that reason, I think that they needed another scorer off the bench. They needed another guard to run with Steve Blake, and they ended up picking Jarrett Jack later in this draft outside of the lottery. So I think they needed that guy. They needed the point guard. So I think that's why it makes sense to have Monte on here. So I'm going to go once again with Sulman picking Monte Ellis over Danny Granger for the Blazers. So any objections?
Another Warrior selected.
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. Maybe there's a theme here. Maybe there's a theme here. I like Monte a lot as a player, but I think he makes sense on this team. Maybe he doesn't. He's never really gotten in trouble, so it's not like he would have been another one of the Jailblazer types. Not like Danny Granger did either. But I just think for this team, I think he makes more sense. Okay. All right, we're starting to get interesting here. So with the 7th overall pick, the Toronto Raptors selected Charlie Villanueva out of UConn. So, Osama, who did you have the Raptors picking here?
Charlie Villanueva is such a funny name now. I took Marvin Williams. He was drafted really young. Do you believe he retired at 33? He was, and I feel like he was in the league forever. Similar to Lou Williams, a lot of longevity, even though he never quite made that leap to the elite of the elite. He played very consistently. He was super durable. These are both things that are really hard to find in the NBA. And he wasn't really a bad contributor anywhere he played. His numbers were always pretty good. He just never hit that, like, this is the guy you want in a playoff series level. But when he retired, it was still pretty surprising. He was producing for Milwaukee. He had some good years in Charlotte. I think the Raptors just took the wrong forward here. Instead of Charlie Villanueva, they get solid, consistent scoring from Marvin Williams to complement Chris Bosh. He was drafted way too high, but this is a good spot for him.
Okay, and so Mon, who did you have the Raptors picking?
I had them going Andrew Bogut here, actually. And so I thought, you draft a guy like Bogut, you move Bosh down to the power forward, and you got a pretty solid front court there. And, Bogut, definitely complements Bosh's playing style. He's a defensive player. He could pass out of the post, do things like that. And so, he's a guy that really would complement Chris Bosh there in Toronto and really give him a really nice front court there.
No concerns about clogging things up for Chris Bosh. I know this was a long time ago. The NBA was very different. This is still
the era of the big man, Khaled. So I think, just because Bogut is able to kind of operate out of the post and, Bosh, we know, could shoot the ball, things like that, I thought they would have play off each other really well.
Okay. Yeah, you guys are going to kill me for this one, but Bogut is the winner here. And Sulman, I think he makes sense. He makes more sense, right? This is a different era. If this was 2022 and we had prime Andrew Bogut and prime Chris Bosh, well, maybe Chris Bosh is just a stretch 4, so it's not a big deal, and he plays more like, I don't know, Anthony Davis than anybody else. But, yeah, I'm going to go with Andrew Bogut. He makes sense. He gives them a bit more of a spine here. I think maybe they could have gone with a guard because their starting backcourt was pretty horrible, but you can build on that, and I think going with Bogut in this position makes sense. Any objections?
You're really committing to the bit at this point.
I promise it's not a bit. I swear. So, Mon, all right, so you are ahead now, 5-4. So we'll move on to the 8th overall pick. And the 8th overall pick was Channing Frye. So the New York Knicks selected forward Channing Frye out of Arizona. So, Sulman, who did you have them picking here?
I had them picking Marcin Gortat, aka the Polish Hammer. So at this time, the Knicks are starting like Eddie Curry at center. Maybe they had Jerome James on the roster, guys like that. And, Gortat was probably the next best center here in this draft. In his prime, he was a guy who could give you, 14 points a game, 9 rebounds, things like that. And so definitely just an upgrade here for the Knicks at center, who were hurting at that position, and they never have to pay Eddie Curry or play Eddie Curry, either one, and they can just move on and have a solid guy like Gortat in there.
Okay, Sam, who did you have them picking?
Yeah, I went with Ersan Ilyasova here. I think the Knicks should have taken him. They took Channing Frye, who was a similar player. I think Ilyasova had more to offer. Frye takes a huge hit on his defensive ability, and his game aged very well as a stretch four. The age of small ball evolved in the 2010s. He played in Spain for a few years, and it showed. He came back a distributor. He could handle the ball. He was really good at creating shots for himself. It was a young Knicks team looking for depth in the front court. He would have been a great contributor to this team, and he played in the league for a long time.
They both played 13 years, or sorry, 12 years for Gortat, who was a second round pick by the Phoenix Suns, and 13 for Ilyasova, who was also a second round pick, but for the Milwaukee Bucks. So, Osama, you went out here. You're lucky because I love Ersan Ilyasova. I have an irrational love for this guy as a player. I watched him a lot. He spent, I believe it was a year and a half in Philadelphia, and I fell in love with the guy. Maybe it was just a year, and I thought he's just like a jack of all trades type guy, right? He can defend a lot of positions. He can stretch the floor. He's the king of taking charges. I think him and when I think of guys taking charges, I think of him and Kyle Lowry as just like absolute pests. So for that reason and that reason alone, Gortat is great. Don't get me wrong; he is the second leading rebounder in this class. Uh, but Ilyasova is kind of hanging around in a little bit more categories with assists, points, all that stuff. Gortat was a starter for a while, I believe, in Orlando next to Dwight Howard. And Ilyasova was more of a bench guy, but I just really like him as a player. I think he contributes to a winning team. So, any objections here?
Gortat also started on the Wizards. Yes, one objection. I feel like you just took Ilyasova because he was Turkish.
That is totally false. That's a false accusation.
Uh,
It doesn't hurt.
by the way, the bit continues because Khaled was a season ticket holder for the Sixers and watched Ilyasova on a nightly basis, and that's why he was favored here. So didn't play for the Warriors, but played for a team
His second
Khaled
favorite
watched
team.
very frequently.
That's fair. I mean that's again one of the main reasons I really like him as a player is because I got to watch him a lot. I really like Gortat. Don't get me wrong. I think he's great, and again, he was also part of a winning atmosphere in Orlando. But I think Ilyasova is just a more versatile player, and because of that, I'm giving Osama the point here. So, all right, with the ninth overall pick, this is gross. The Golden State Warriors selected forward Ike Diogu out of Arizona State. So, Sama, who did you have the Warriors picking here?
Uh, David Lee. I would have picked David Lee a lot higher on this list. You know, all-star, great contributor for Golden State during their championship run. Had a great peak with the Knicks. He had the year he was an all-star. His win shares were over, I think, 10%, which is incredible. He showed a great ability to get to the rim and finish. He was a double-double machine, like you said. Great playmaking ability. All noticeable during that all-star season. I don't want to rehash too much. You mentioned the Draymond Green thing, taking his job. Uh, but the reason why Draymond Green took his job is, you know, he drops for me, and I think for Sulman because of that lack of defense. So Draymond Green took his job because he was a significantly better defender and could distribute the ball at the same level. He also wasn't really a threat protecting the rim. I think that's what dropped him off so far on this redraft. So David Lee still would have been a great pick, and he still ends up on the Warriors after all.
Yeah, he just ends up there a few years earlier than expected. Salman, who did you have the Warriors using the ninth overall pick on?
I mean, at this point, I know Osama's going to get the point here, but I went Marvin Williams. Like Osama said, overall solid player. I know there's a lot of hype coming in with him in terms of like, oh, he's this athletic guy. You could do a lot of things, but I think he just never figured out how to shoot pretty well. But he played a long time in the NBA, had played about 14 years here, and in his best seasons, he averaged 14.8 points per game, 5.7 rebounds. So I think he would have just, had a nice role with the Warriors as a small ball power forward, and Don Nelson could have unlocked him a little bit in terms of just having him run out there in transition and really bring the ball up as a small ball guy. And I think that would have been a really good fit for him with the Dubs.
Okay, I feel like I'm being trolled a little bit by you guys, but it is David Lee. I mean, he makes sense, and he's just like an old school big man, right? He had the post moves. He was smooth. He had the drop step. He could do all that good stuff. And I think him getting benched in favor of Draymond, again, like Osama said, it was the defense. He wasn't much of a rim protector, but it was also kind of the transition from the NBA that we grew up watching with like two big men, a lot of the inside out game to the complete opposite, right? Where you go with everything is outside in. You're expecting more from your bigs. With David Lee, we're not expecting him to run the offense. Like he's the nail, not the hammer. With Draymond, he's the one that's setting everything up, and I think that's in general that's the expectation now from our bigs. And I think, but in this situation, if he does go to the We Believe Warriors, I think he does make sense because he's able to play that small ball center. The Warriors were kind of on the cutting edge of that curve of everybody on the court was like between 6'2" and 6'8", unless you include what's his name, Monte Ellis, where he was on the smaller side. But everybody was kind of around the same height. Everybody's switching. You're not too concerned with defense. You're just shooting and rebounding and kind of hoping for the best. And I think he does fit because he was a mobile big, but he could never shoot. But I think he does make sense for the Warriors, and I think he would have been a great fit on this team. So, any objections?
Khaled, imagine this lineup: Al Harrington, Marvin Williams, Steven Jackson, Baron Davis, Monte Ellis. That's much better than putting David Lee in that mix.
I disagree, but okay.
Damn. All right, I had to shoot my shot there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. All right, so with the 10th overall pick, the Los Angeles Lakers selected center Andrew Bynum out of high school. So, Man, who did you have the Lakers picking here?
I maybe went for a bit of a stretch here, but I went Amir Johnson. I know the Lakers were looking for this big after Shaquille O'Neal left, and Amir Johnson, just a solid rotational big, could play power forward, could play center. He could do a little bit of everything: rebound, score, play defense, and just a guy who was relatively healthy and played a decent amount in the NBA versus Andrew Bynum. And so I thought Amir Johnson made a little bit more sense here for the Lakers. And that's the only other big that really came to mind for me. So I took Amir Johnson here.
Okay. Osama, who did you have the Lakers take?
I disagree. I thought the Lakers made the right choice by selecting Andrew Bynum from the beginning. I think that they made the right choice either way. His peak didn't last as long as I'm sure they would have hoped. But those 3 straight years they went to the finals, he was a guy Kobe Bryant could really depend on. He was huge at the time. And paired with Pau Gasol, they were probably one of the top front court duos in the league. And he was an all-star because of the impact that he made during that peak. I think he deserves to be here at 10. I know he was unfortunately a bit injury prone, but just the way this ended up working out for the Lakers and how his potential was tapped during this peak, the Lakers made the right move here.
I 100% agree. Listen, Amir Johnson is great. He played in the league for a long time. He was, I think he played for almost 13, 14 years, but it's Amir Johnson. You know what I'm saying? Like
he's giving you 10. He's giving you 10 points a night, Khaled. What is Andrew Bynum giving you? Like 5 games a season with 20 and 10. I'll take Amir Johnson.
Rings.
82 games with 10 and 10.
He's giving you rings.
So you could have won a ring with Amir Johnson, man. I don't think Andrew Bynum was that crucial.
So in this position, I think what you are discussing or what the philosophical argument is, do I want 10 years or 15 years, whatever, of like mid, average play, a guy who kind of knows what to do, be in the right places, whatever, or am I rolling the dice and taking, 5 years of greatness or close to greatness? I know it sounds ridiculous.
I would say it was more like 2 years for Andrew Bynum.
Okay, 2 or 3 years.
Like I think in 8 seasons he played maybe 1 year of 80 games, and then rest of the seasons he played like 55, maybe. Yeah,
that is absolutely correct. There was a 3-year stretch where he played 65, 54, and 60 games, and then he blew out his knee, and then that was the end of that. he was immature. He had a lot of off-court issues, things like that. I think part of it had to do with playing in the pressure cooker that was the Lakers with Kobe and everything that came with it. But once again, he was an all-star in 2011-12 season. He was an all NBA player. That's nothing. That's something that you have to acknowledge. Like he was one of the
All right,
15
that's fair. You got me with the all
in the
NBA.
NBA.
I didn't. Yeah, you got me with the all NBA. I'll give you that.
Yeah. So for all the jokes that we can throw about Andrew Bynum with his weird haircut in Philly and the way he clotheslined, what's his name, JJ Barea on the way out of the
Did he also steal like bowling shoes or something when he was in Philly? Like he went like stole bowling shoes from a bowling alley or something in Philly. He was doing the weird stuff.
He was doing the weirdest stuff, and he had the crazy haircut and all these things. So his immaturity is definitely a factor, but I would roll the dice, and again with the benefit of hindsight, we can maybe take a little better care of this guy, maybe give him more, I don't know, mentorship coming up so he doesn't end up down this road. But I think that you would trade a couple years of Andrew Bynum being the best big man in the NBA versus what you get from Amir Johnson. So again, no offense to Amir Johnson, who I think was a fine player. He was fine. But,
and I can't even claim Warrior bias here, Khaled. So
no, it's the complete opposite. Because again, Amir Johnson was on the Sixers during that year, or the years I lived in Philly. So I really appreciated what he did. I actually
you watched him. Yeah, you watched him closely. Dang.
I do.
Did
I have
you
his
really?
Raptors jersey from I bought it from Ross for $15.99. So go Amir Johnson. All right. So with the 11th overall pick, the Orlando Magic selected Fran Vasquez. Osama, who did you have the Magic picking here?
Yeah, I saw that Sulman picked Amir Johnson in the last round. The Magic should have taken him here. I love him taken here and being paired with a very young Dwight Howard. This would have been a steal too. I mean, Fran Vasquez was just the wrong move. Amir Johnson played 14 seasons, and his early years would have been just so more impactful than they were. He was drafted by a Detroit Pistons team already starting Ben and Rasheed Wallace. The outcome of his career early on in his development would have been significantly different had he been taken by the Magic. So I think this would have been very interesting. I like him here.
And Salman, who did you have the Magic picking?
I went with Ilyasova, your son Ilyasova here. Obviously, great shooter, could do a lot of other things. But the Magic had shooters, and they kind of started developing around Dwight, like guys who could shoot. And so Ilyasova is just another player who comes in and can do that. And he had a solid 11-year career, and so I think he's a nice fit there with Hedo Turkoglu, Jameer Nelson, Pat Garrity, and Rashard Lewis, who comes in later as well. So he's just a nice piece there for the Magic.
I like it. I like it a lot. I saw Osama react negatively to that selection because he knew that Salman was going to win this one. Again, all respect to Amir Johnson. I know maybe his career goes a little bit differently if he is not selected by the Pistons and he's not playing behind those two great players. I do think that Ilyasova, for all the reasons that I thought he would have been a good fit elsewhere, I think he makes perfect sense here. So the Magic were another team that were took a little bit of a different approach to things, right? With the way they were building out the team, and they figured out at some point that if we put Dwight Howard on the court with 4 shooters and 4 guys that can distribute the ball, then that's a recipe for success. And I think Ilyasova fits that position pretty well. He's a decent 3-point shooter in his career, versatile defender. I don't know necessarily if you want him operating the offense, but you also are not worried, if he gets the ball at the top of the key with like 8 seconds left on the shot clock. Like you think something positive might happen, which is something that, with Amir Johnson, you're not really expecting. He's just going to be a good, solid backup to Dwight Howard, I think, is his ceiling. So I'm going to give the point to Salman for this one. Any objections?
He would have been a great backup behind Dwight Howard.
There you go. All right, so slight objection. Okay, so with the 12th overall pick, the Los Angeles Clippers selected Yaroslav Korolev. Salman, who did you have the Clippers selecting here?
I went Andrew Bynum here. Again, obviously we were discussing him and all that stuff. Talented guy, just couldn't stay healthy. But in some of his in his prime seasons, he was averaging 18 points, 11 and a half rebounds, things like that. And I think going to a team like the Clippers, where he can maybe play a little less minutes because they have Chris Kaman, Elton Brand. He has more chances to stay healthy and play a little bit longer here in the NBA. But again, he's a solid guy and solid contributor, and he would have played really well here on the Clippers.
Okay, interesting. All right, Osama, who did you have the Clippers picking?
Yeah, I think that Andrew Bynum shouldn't have gone to the other LA team. I'm going to attack your pick a little bit, Sulman. I took Raymond Felton here. I can't help but think every time I think about Raymond Felton, when he used to appear in Portland, they would boo him because they thought he showed up really fat when he played there. So every time he was there, they'd be like, "Boo, fatty, Raymond Felton." Anyway, yeah, he drops from what is it, like 5 to like 12 here. He's just overdrafted, but I mean, looking at who the Clippers drafted, this was a much better choice. Korolev only played 168 minutes in the NBA. So at the time, they had a very injury-prone Sean Livingston and 12-year vet Sam Cassell. So Raymond Felton very much needed. He played 971 games. So again, durability, longevity, very hard to come by. This is a great spot for him.
So I know that I was in favor of the Andrew Bynum pick to the Lakers, but I think I'm going to lean towards Raymond Felton for the following reasons. So we talked about a few pods back. We talked about Michael Olowokandi, right? And when he went to the Clippers, and this is a very similar situation where I think the lack of player development on the Clippers, the lack of a true culture, the lack of good ownership, and one of the worst owners in the history of sports. I think all of these things would have contributed to Andrew Bynum flaming out way earlier than he actually did, even though he already had a short career. I think if he goes to the Clippers, even if he's he's a 12th overall pick, it's not like he's a top 5 pick. I think playing with Kobe and those expectations, while it might have kind of ground him down, I think it still forced him to be the best version of himself. And if he goes to the Clippers, where I know they had a solid team and he would have played behind two pretty good players in Kaman and Elton Brand, but I think he wouldn't have been the same player because, again, they don't have that infrastructure in place and they don't have that team culture. So Raymond Felton, I think the main issue with Raymond Felton is he has like a serious case of fat face. So I think of him.
And he loves donuts, apparently. And he loves donuts.
I think of him in like Ben Roethlisberger. Like even when Big Ben was in shape, he just had a big face. He had a fat face. So people always thought he was bigger than he was, and he was kind of he's a heftier point guard. But if he was out of shape, he would have had a career like Baron Davis. If he was out of shape, he would have been out of the league in 5-6 years. But instead, he plays until he's 34. Like Sam said, he plays 971 games. He starts 659 games. He was overdrafted, but he's top 5 in this class in in minutes, and he's he's 5th in minutes. He is 7th in points and 3rd in assists. So he does get some credit for that longevity. So any objections here to Osama getting the point for Raymond Felton?
When the Clippers drafted DeAndre Jordan 3 years later, was CP on the team? Or CP came after? CP came after.
I believe he was.
CP3 was on the team when they drafted DeAndre Jordan?
I can fact check that, but I think so, yeah.
All right. Well, I just want to say they drafted DeAndre Jordan 3 years later, and he turned out fine. So,
but again,
to your point, Bynum was a bit of a knucklehead, things like that, and Jordan was more of a professional guy. So I'll
he never had maturity issues with DeAndre Jordan. Again, that was a different Clippers team. Maybe if it's 2009, 2010, then sure. Because again, Chris Paul would have whipped him into shape the same way that Kobe did. So, yeah.
You don't think Sam Cassell would have done that for him?
Sam Cassell, he's okay. He's decent. He's a longtime vet, but I don't think he has the same cachet as Chris Paul or Kobe. He's not an all-time great. As much as we hate on Chris Paul, he would have been the first overall pick in this draft. One of the best point guards ever. So, all right. So with the final 2 picks coming up, Osama is leading 8-6. So we'll see if someone can mount a comeback and tie things up here. So with the third overall pick, the then Charlotte Bobcats selected the aforementioned Sean May, forward out of UNC. So, Osama, who did you have the Bobcats using their second lottery pick on?
Yeah, it gets pretty slim from here, obviously. I picked Gerald Green, who I wanted to check to see if he had a nickname. Surprisingly, no nickname for this guy. He spent most of his years coming off the bench. He started maybe half of the games for the Phoenix Suns in the 2013-14 season. Otherwise, a career backup shooting guard. He could really fly, right? He won the dunk contest in 2007. The main knock on him was his shooting. He was probably the streakiest shooter that I think out of everyone that we've selected here. But he was drafted on a Boston Celtics team that was kind of all over the place in talent. They could have used him scoring off the bench. It did make sense. So he now appears in this draft with Lou Williams on my version of the draft on the Bobcats, which would have made for a hell of a heat check backcourt, if you ask me. So I like Gerald Green here.
And Sulman, who did you have the Bobcats picking?
I actually had the Bobcats going Raymond Felton here. So, they needed a point guard, and Felton is probably the best one left here on the board for me. Solid rotational guy. Obviously not worthy being taken top 5 here, but at the end of the lottery, he's a guy you could take. He played a lot of seasons, a lot of games. He averaged 15.5 points per game in his prime and 8 assists. And so, he's a good point guard, not a great point guard. And, he's better than playing guys like Brevin Knight and Kevin Burleson, who I don't even know who that is. So, I think Felton made a lot of sense here for the Bobcats, just not at 5, but here at 13, he makes a lot of sense for the team.
I completely agree. I'm sorry, Sam. I do not see it with Gerald Green. I don't think he is worthy of being a lottery pick. He could fly. But that's all he was, right? He was. I think the most memorable thing about him was, aside from the dunk contest, I think he has 9 fingers, or like 9.5. I don't know why I know that, but I do. And I don't see it, man. He was always okay. He's a career 36% 3-point shooter, but I don't think he is going to contribute much to a winning team. I know he was on those Rockets teams, the CP3, James Harden Rockets teams, but he was just a bit part player at that point in his career. And I think in Sulman's world, where the Bobcats picked David Lee and Raymond Felton, I think that's a pretty potent combination. That's a good 2-man game there. And I talked up Raymond Felton quite a bit in the last pick. So I do like him as a player. I don't think he was, again, like Sulman said, he's not a great player, but he was always pretty good. And I think with the 13th overall pick, you settle for pretty good versus whatever Gerald Green is, which I don't think is pretty good. So any objections?
I mean, what other choices did I have left? I mean,
you had better choices than Gerald Green. You had better.
Yes,
choices.
You did.
I mean, I don't think so. I was just looking. I was like,
It was almost like you just thought about, okay, who's the most memorable guy here? And you're like, you know what? Gerald Green used to dunk a lot, and that's about it. So I think you got lazy there with that pick. I'll say that's a lazy pick. How about that? Okay, so with the last pick of the 2005 NBA Draft Lottery, the Minnesota Timberwolves picked guard Rashad McCants out of UNC. I really like him as a player, mostly for fantasy reasons. I think he won me a fantasy trophy or title back in college. So, Sulman, who did you have the Timberwolves picking here?
I did not have him sticking with Rashad McCants. I actually had him going slightly different direction here and taking Jared Jack. Just, a guy who could just come off the bench and really score for you. And, in his prime, he was giving you about 15 a game and 5 or 6 assists a game. And so just, Jared Jack, solid bench scorer, former Warrior, was really great off the bench for the Warriors as well. And so, just another guy that, I think would have came in and contributed for the Wolves. And Rashad McCants was a guy who did it for a little bit of time, but Jared Jack did it for much longer.
I know what you're trying to do here, but Sama, who did you have the Timberwolves picking?
Well, I picked someone that also played for the Warriors, Nate Robinson. Union City, California's very own Nate Robinson. We went to the same high school, aka Crypto Nate. I don't know how new that nickname is, but I like it. At 5'9", best hops probably at his height of all time, right? Given he hopped over somebody massive like Shaq or Dwight Howard and in the dunk contest. He was drafted by the Knicks. They were playing 9-year, soon to lose his mind, unfortunately, Stephon Marbury. So he was the only other point guard on the team. It would have been a great pick. He was picked by the Knicks. It was a good pick. So they drafted McCants. He only played 249 games in the league. So the collection of point guards were high in quantity, but they ended up always lacking in quality for Minnesota. He would have brought a much-needed boost to their backcourt. And they were hoarding guards. They didn't really give Kevin Garnett much to feel like they were doing everything they could to help him. Nate was a great spark plug off the bench, streaky, but a fun hooper. Became a journeyman. He was a bit all over the place because his talents were great. If you were just looking for a little backcourt depth, so yeah, love Nate.
Dang, I think you're gonna get the point, Osama. That's my prediction.
Your prediction is wrong. So again, you guys cannot accuse me of anti-Warrior or pro-Warriors bias because, as you said, both of these guys did play for the Warriors at some point in their careers. But I would prefer Jarrett Jack in this position.
That's ridiculous. Asinine.
I thought Khaled would have more love for Nate Robb, so I guess I was wrong. He liked Jarrett Jack.
I do love Nate Robinson. Don't get me wrong. I thought he was great. He's a lot of fun to watch.
I don't love him enough.
He's a good bench scorer, but I think everything that Nate Robinson does, Jarrett Jack does a little bit better, with the exception of 3-point shooting, because I think Nate Robinson's like 1.5% better in his career. But I think Jarrett Jack is he's bigger, so he's a better defender than Nate Robinson. He's had a longer career than Nate Robinson. He has 3,000 more points, 1,000 more rebounds, and almost 2,000 more assists over their careers. And he only played 200 more games than Nate Robinson. So I think for longevity, I think for overall talent, for everything that he brings to the team, I'm going to lean towards Jarrett Jack. So that actually ties things up. So it's kind of boring, but both of you guys finished with 8 points.
But can Jarrett Jack jump, though?
He can't jump over Dwight Howard, but he can jump.
No,
he doesn't need to jump over Dwight Howard.
But can he jump, though?
He can. I'll say that.
No one remembers him. This is silly. No one remembers him.
Does Nate Robinson have the shoe collection that Jarrett Jack has? Jarrett Jack has.
I don't know.
He's apparently the biggest shoe collector in the NBA, alongside PJ Tucker. That's the other thing about Jarrett Jack.
See, that's the brand awareness thing. See, you don't think of Jarrett Jack when you think shoe collector. When you think a short man that could jump, you think Nate Robinson. This is a branding awareness victory.
But I mean, to be serious, right? You think about the kind of players that Kevin Garnett has had to deal with, the kind of point guards that he had to play with. I think his best seasons were with Sam Cassell, who was that traditional point guard, and I think that is what Jarrett Jack is, right? And I think that's another from a team fit perspective. That's what he does, and I think he would have been a good fit next to KG for the same reason that Raymond Felton would have been a good fit next to David Lee. I think Jack fits the bill here. So, and you talked about guys that you're kind of running out of choices when you pick Gerald Green. I mean, there's a few guys that would have taken over him. You didn't have Marcin Gortat on your board. You didn't. I don't think you picked Jarrett Jack. I would have taken Channing Frye over Gerald Green. There's a few guys. So CJ Miles.
I think you should give Osama -1 for the Gerald Green pick and have me win this. that should how we should decide this right here. -1 for Gerald Green.
I think so. So, like I said, we both ended, or you guys both ended at 8 points apiece. Any final thoughts on the top 14 selections before we move into the honorable mentions?
Gerald Green was fine.
It was just a weak draft after the first few guys, and a lot of injuries in this draft for certain guys that maybe their career was, could have been more if they had those injuries. But yeah, just a pretty weak class.
Yeah, it's a good role player draft. Like you scroll down the names, you're like, okay, I remember him. He was okay. He was okay. Even like you know Andrew Bogut. So he's a starter, but he's still a role player. Danny Granger. I mean, for some at some points in his career, he was pretty good, but overall, nothing too special. He was one time All Star. Good for him. Um, so yeah, it's a good role player draft, but it is super top heavy once you get past the top two, pretty much. So all right. So we'll move on to honorable mentions. Is there anyone that you guys had on your bubble that you maybe would have thrown in? So we'll start with Osama. Anybody that you had on your honorable mentions?
Yeah, Marcin Gortat. He looks like a sorcerer. That's why I. That's the only thing I got on him. He just looks like a sorcerer or a pharaoh. And CJ Miles.
Yeah.
All right, so Mon, who did you have as your honorable mentions?
Yeah, CJ Miles was on there for me, Nate Robinson, and then Channing Frye as well. So those guys were all in the mix there at the end of the lottery for me, but just didn't take them. Gerald Green, not an honorable mention. Wouldn't be even close to an honorable mention here for me.
Dishonorable mention.
He's a dishonorable mention, sure, I'll give you that. But yeah,
All right,
those
so
are my honorable mentions.
yeah, yeah, all fair. I think there was some nice variation in the picks, which I appreciated. So, in our next segment, we'll talk about some of the guys that did not survive the redraft. So, I mean, the top five, top six all made it in, which is pretty unusual, I'll say. With our maybe it just speaks to how bad the rest of the draft is, but I think from the rest of the redrafts we've done, there's been quite a few big busts in the top six. You can maybe call Martell Webster a bust, but at least he played for a long time in the NBA. I think the first one was Charlie Villanueva. What was it about him that makes him a kind of a bust and led to him not surviving the redraft?
He just wasn't
The
good
other
enough
guys
for
were
me.
better.
Yeah, I mean,
Other guys were
he
better.
just,
Okay.
I mean, people, I think he was even like people called him a cancer, right, to the locker room and things like that. So, I mean,
They
he
did
just
not call
thought.
him.
I swear,
It
people used to
was
call. He was like a cancer in the locker. Someone used to say something
no,
like
no,
that
no, no.
about him.
This
No, no.
this is hilarious. You're
You're gonna get
misremembering.
Am
canceled,
I
Salman.
mixing
That's
some?
what's gonna happen.
No, no.
You're gonna.
Listen. You're
Am I mixing something up
misremembering.
here?
Yeah, you're
I'm misremembering.
misremembering.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
So
Is it
he
because he
has
was bald and people
alopecia.
thought he had cancer? Is that what it was?
He's
I
not
don't know.
just bald. He has alopecia, so he has no
Yes.
body hair. So he has no eyebrows as
Oh,
well.
yes.
And
That's right.
Kevin Garnett, when he
Called
was
him a cancer. Yes.
no, he called him a cancer patient. He said, "You look like a cancer
Patient.
patient."
Yes. That's right. There we
Kevin
go.
Garnett with his famous trash talk. And then when asked after the game about the trash talk, KG tries to bullshit and say, "No, I was saying that he's a cancer to this team," which is
Okay. All
absolutely not
right. See,
something
I
that
remember
KG
bits
would
and pieces
say.
of it, but not the whole thing. Got it. Yeah, that's a KG thing to say. But anyways, he was just not good enough. Didn't put up numbers, and I don't even know why KG wasted time talking trash to this guy.
Well, that's just what KG does. I mean, did you hear the story about KG and Joakim Noah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Joke.
So that's just what he does.
I mean, KG would talk trash to anybody, right? So
Exactly. That's just kind of his thing. So the next guy is Channing Frye. He did not survive the redraft. Osama, why did you not have him in your lottery?
Just defensively, I thought that Ilyasova just took his place in the draft. Um, that was a huge thing for me. There were a lot of similar players. I put Gerald Green in because backcourt depth shooting. I know he wasn't a great pick, but that's just that's what I went with. I saw that his game aged well, get with the evolution of the 3-point shot. So I just left Channing Frye out.
Okay. The next guy, I don't think we have to talk much about, but Ike Diogu, ninth overall to the Warriors. He stunk. It was just that simple.
yeah,
He just wasn't very
He was
good.
terrible. He was
All
he was
right.
wasting his time playing video games. That's what I.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
There you go.
And then 11th overall, Fran Vasquez. Salman, why do you think he did not survive the redraft?
He just wasn't very good. I mean, I don't even know how long he survived in the NBA. Maybe it was in more than 2-3 years. I can't remember, but he was just not very good of a player. Didn't put up much numbers. Didn't play a lot. So wouldn't even consider drafting him.
He actually does not have any stats on Basketball Reference.
Wow.
So I don't
Okay.
think he played at all.
There you go. So I don't think he played at all. Yeah, I was like, I don't remember him playing, but I can't imagine he lasted more than 2 years in the league. So yeah.
The next guy, Yaroslav Korolev. Sama, what happened with him?
He only played 168 minutes. That's what happened.
Okay, enough said. Sean May. So, Mon, what happened with him? I think he was just undersized, right?
Yeah, I think maybe if Sean May plays in today's NBA, he's a better player. But at that time, he's undersized. He's a little overweight. He's not really in shape. Kind of, what's kind of the knocks on him, and so he just doesn't really survive in that big man era there in the NBA. But maybe in today's NBA, if he gets a little bit more in shape and he runs the floor and things like that, maybe he's a little better in this era.
Yeah, he's like he's reminds me a lot of just the typical undersized big man in college that we see, that like you can dominate when you're in college, but if you don't have a real like discernible skill or an athletic advantage, then you're not going to do anything at the pro level. Who was the other guy, that white kid from North Carolina? Kind of looked like Bart Simpson. I'm totally blanking on his name. But it's a similar vibe, right? If you're undersized, you're kind of a tweener, and then
Cole
you end
Aldridge?
up.
You talking about Cole Aldridge?
It doesn't matter.
Oh.
He's
Henry
irrelevant.
Ellison. I'm just throwing out white guys that I know.
Right? Just name the Plumlee brothers, and you probably end up on one of them. Okay, and then Rashad McCants. He was the last pick in the lottery. Sam, what happened with him?
Bart Simpson was Tyler Hansborough, by the way.
Yes, thank you. There you go. I was going to say Heller or something like that, but yeah, Hansborough. There you go.
Yeah, Rashad McCants, he struggled with some injuries early on, and he just wasn't good enough. He bounced around, couldn't make a practice squad, I think, for like the Mavericks one year or something like that, and that was the end of him. He just didn't live up to the hype.
Yeah, he had one good year, and that was, again, why he's memorable to me, is for fantasy reasons. He played, in 07, 08, he had his highest, career highs, 15 points, 3 assists, 3 rebounds, and he was just kind of a nice bit part player. But yeah, never lived up to being a lottery pick and was out of the league after 5 years. So that is unfortunate. All right. So that is it for our show today, guys. Thank you both for your selections. Again, it ended in a tie, which is kind of boring. I know this is basketball and not soccer.
No, I won, right, Khaled? Because I won, right? Because Osama drafted Gerald Green, and he gets -1 for that, right?
You should get -10 for that one. You win 8 to -2. I just don't get it.
Heat check, baby. Heat check.
Maybe I would have picked him last, but yeah, I just don't see it. But yeah, thanks guys. Appreciate your time today. Thank you everyone for checking us out. Make sure to follow us on all the major social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And of course, you can find us on all of the major podcasting platforms. So make sure to follow, subscribe to the podcast, and leave us a review. Thanks, everybody.